I want to talk a little bit about the idea of prerequisites. What I mean by that is by always having an idea that if we're working on something, what are the things that need to be good, that we need to accomplish before we do that. I'm going to give you a couple examples. This is one I see all the time. I'll be working on a jumper course and a horse will be falling in on the turn. You know, as they come around the short side of the arena, they're turning back to the left to come back to a jump, maybe a big oxer, and the horse will fall in on the turn. And we'll talk about leg yielding the horse out, having the horse stay out a little bit off of your inside leg. Of course, you can also have the horse stay out off of your outside rein or both reins. But leg yielding in particular is something that can really help you in all horse disciplines and in your warm-up for different classes. If you're having trouble doing that at the canter, what are some prerequisites? You know, so right away I'd think I would ask you, can you do this at the trot? So I'd ask you to come around, you know, through that turn and leg yield to the outside of the trot. If you can't do it at the trot, rather than continuing to work on that, kind of banging our head against the wall, I'd see if you could leg yield along the rail. If you still have trouble doing that and your horse is just bending its head to the right, but the feet are still traveling straight, is I'd ask if you could leg yield at the walk. Usually I'll have people leg yield at the walk on the rail first and then off the rail the way that you might in a dressage arena from the center line to the rail or from the rail to the center line. If you can't leg yield at the walk, you're probably not going to be able to leg yield at the trot. If you can't leg yield at the trot, you're probably not going to be able to leg yield at the canter. If you're having trouble leg yielding at the walk, what's a prerequisite for that? Maybe a turn on the forehand. So in that case, I'd have you walk down the rail, halt, have the hindquarters come to the inside, have the front legs stay where they are, and turn all the way around the front legs till you've turned 180 degrees the other way and you can walk off. What if your horse can't even do that? What's a prerequisite for that? In that case, what I might do is work with the horse and the rider from the ground. Can the horse understand the idea of moving the hindquarters away from your hand, just off of steady pressure? What if they can't even do that? Can the horse move off of steady pressure backwards or drop their head? What I'm looking for is always a way, if we're having trouble, if we're struggling with something, if we're spending 30 seconds, 60 seconds, sometimes minutes or weeks or days, you know, like, and we're not accomplishing that, we want to back up and we want to check off, make sure we've accomplished the prerequisites. Another example that I see quite a lot of is people that are wanting to improve the quality of the gait in their horse. They're wanting a more athletic, better quality of trot or more athletic, better quality canter. And they keep kind of, you know, with a lazy horse or a dull horse, they keep kind of like pushing away at that and micromanaging that, and it turns into like this constant sort of back and thing where they really just end up sort of bugging their horse or annoying their horse, and it doesn't really improve that much anyway. I have two prerequisites that I want you to accomplish before you start working on the quality of the gait. Number one, can you maintain gait? So what I mean by that is if you're wanting to trot, give yourself a certain length of time or a certain number of laps of the arena and see if you can do that without constantly micromanaging your horse, even if the trot is lazy. So what I'm saying is if you're trotting along, allow them to come back to the walk, then correct it. Maybe use the stick if you need to, but then have them trot off until they can maintain gait. Maybe if I'm lunging, I might pick 4 circles. Can they keep trotting for 4 circles without me having to micromanage it, even if it's lazy? My second prerequisite is how good are your transitions? I would say I want them a 7 or an 8 out of 10. What that means is if they're trotting around, even if it's lazy, they're going around in a circle around me, I'm lunging them, and I ask them to go from the trot to the canter, can they do it on the first time I ask, not the second, not the third time I ask, but the first time I ask, and can they do it without me telling them? What I mean by that is, do I have to ask nicely and then use the stick, or could I just kind of lift up my hand, give that quiet cluck, and they pick up the canter from that lazy trot? If you're already working on the quality of the gait and yet you can't maintain gait and you can't do a trot to canter transition on the first attempt, I would say go back and work on those two things first. And one of the interesting things is that if you actually work on those two things, the quality of the gait seems to get better almost by itself. For almost anything that I do with horses, if I start to struggle with something for more than 30 seconds, in my mind, I just take a little check there and I go, hey, if I'm struggling with this, if my horse is struggling with this, have I really checked off all the prerequisites? Sometimes I'll take a walk break, go back to something simpler, and then work up to the exercise I was working on before. Of course, the most obvious time we see that is if you're taking a jumping lesson. You know, if you keep having a stop at 3'6", or you keep having a rail at 3'6" and things aren't going well, what's the first thing we do? Hopefully, it's lower the height of the fence. You go back to 3'3" or 3 feet, and that's sort of your prerequisite. Jumping a 3-foot course is a prerequisite for jumping a 3'3" course. We work our way up gradually. So if you're having trouble with your young horse, and even if you're not having trouble and you want to bring them along, try to have a clear idea in your head of the steps that you want to go on in order to get to your goal.